back in February 2016, I wrote a tweet that made everybody on the internet very upset with me.
We really should take a moment to appreciate her vulnerability here in sharing with us this traumatic experience. You can see it on her face, how traumatized she was, having to relive all of this. Don't worry, Scott. Don't worry, you. I think we have a lot in common. You know, I've also said very incendiary things on social media, had a lot of people very upset, saying mean things, call me mean names, and we also both like to wear glasses with dumb colors. I think we have a lot in common. I think by the end of this video, we're gonna be good friends.
My tweet basically said I was looking for stories for BuzzFeed Canada, and I was hoping to find people who were preferably not male and not white. If you don't like white men, you can go back to India and stop using white technology. I heard shitting in the street is super fun.
This account has been suspended, and I've never heard of it before. So I have no idea who this person is or what their connection to anything is beyond just they made a mean comment on the internet. But I mean, she's the journalist, so let's see what happens.
How many nights have you stayed awake praying and pleading for a penis?
This time, I didn't find nothing in my search. It seemed to redirect me to this other account, Autism Prowess, which if you go to, they're also suspended, so we have no idea who the fuck that person is either. That's a funny-ass handle, though. I like that. Autism Prowess.
I would really enjoy bashing your stupid fat face in with a hammer.
This one leads to a handsome black man. I'm gonna see if he's a Nazi or a witch or whatever. And oh, look at this dank ass tweet. I'm gonna retweet that. Oh wait, oh fuck, I spelled it wrong. Let's see if this account's also suspended, so we have no idea who the fuck this person is either.
This one just says shut the fuck up cunt, which frankly I appreciate the brevity.
And here we have another person no one's heard of with a suspended account.
I mean, you called me a cunt.
No, I didn't.
At the time, what looked like a lot of really random abusive tweets was actually part of a much larger movement that we now know as the men's rights activists, MRAs for short.
Jesus, who shat in your mouth? I mean, you can't even connect any of these people to the MRM. Who the fuck are these people? Are you gonna talk about like a single MRA?
They advocate for men's rights largely because they feel like women are taking them away.
We're absolutely not participating in relationships with women.
To be charitable, I'll grant that standing around with a sign is more of an MRA-ish thing to do, but dude's wearing a fucking MGTOW shirt. Like, can you try a little harder, just a little bit?
To stay away from all the problems that exist. If we legalize rape...
This is Roosh V, and he's a pickup artist. First, pickup artistry is based on procuring consent from women, so the very existence of it, and the idea of it being pro-rape, is completely retarded. That would go against everything that is based on, which is getting women's consent. The existence and importance of women's consent is the most fundamental aspect of pickup artistry. Second, both MGTOW and people within the MRM look down on pickup artists because they're a bunch of groveling, pussy-begging simps, to put it euphemistically. And third, the point he's making here is actually a pretty brilliant point. The reason is, if you grant the premise, obviously you can contest the premise and then there's no point, but if you grant the premise that legalizing rape would result in less rape overall, then what it does is it puts people in a position where basically what they're admitting is that they'd rather see more women get raped if it meant less victim blaming. That's the point of his argument. So, you know, if you're actually willing to think about things critically instead of just getting offended, then you can have some really interesting insights. But no, fuck that. Let's just keep going.
Women will be more careful with their bodies.
Oh my god, I think I was wrong. That totally authentic and definitely not staged emotional reaction had a genuine impact on me.
Feminism has delivered these angry women and feminine men.
I had to look up this guy's book to see if I could figure out who the fuck this is. Can anyone tell me who the fuck this guy is? I've never seen him before. I have no idea what this clip is. I guess it's from Fox. It says MGTOW University in the background. Is he even an MRA? Someone let me know, because this bitch won't. Oh, look at the disgust. Oh.
These groups cite things like family court laws that are biased.
That's Peter Lloyd, and he is very handsome, and he is a gentleman and an angel and did nothing wrong, and that's why he's the first fucking MRA in your video proper. and he's muted. So we're what? We're like, we have like 4 tweets and 5 people, and literally like one of them you can say, yeah, he's an MRA, we know his name. But you're not even gonna quote anything he says because you don't have anything. This is fucking garbage, dude. What are you doing?
High suicide rates for men and allegedly false rape allegations.
Yeah, I don't know who John Ghomeshi or Daniel Holtzclaw are either.
To argue that feminism is basically ruining the lives of men everywhere.
This is her face. This is her smug mug. This is the Smugle struggle. This is her face within 5 seconds of glibly dismissing the high suicide rate among men. Are you going to revisit that issue? Are you going to actually explore that particular issue? Or are you just going to talk about mean tweets and try to make MRAs seem like terrorists?
Hello?
Hi, David. It's Scaachi from BuzzFeed News.
Yeah, good to talk to you.
Can you tell me a little bit about...
David Futrelle, MRA expert. It's an awful charitable way of saying feminist blogger and fucking muckraker.
What would be the profile of a typical MRA?
There are a certain percentage of men's rights activists who do care about specific issues. I mean, there are older divorced guys who do care about custody and family court and so on.
But for the MRM and their rhetoric, they would not even be admitting to this many men's issues being real. You know, back in 2014, there was ironic misandry. They had bracelets. They had cups with male tears on them. They had fucking Parks and Recreations where Leslie Knope had her little MRA episode where she says that it's not real. Boy, their tone sure has changed. They haven't quite caught up yet, but you know they've definitely in the game of tug of war, they're definitely moving a little bit toward the mud pit.
But the groups that they've sort of inspired are more radical now than they used to be, and more openly misogynistic and hateful, and more given to talk about actual violence towards women.
David Futrelle is so totally concerned about extreme rhetoric promoting violence that he totally swept everything from the Agent Orange files under the rug.
Hi bitch, 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 hi bitch.
You get these guys who are really bitter and angry at the world, and who also sort of don't feel that they have much to live for, quite literally, and that becomes a very, very toxic combination.
Nowhere in this cancer, report, episode of a thing, whatever the fuck it is, propaganda, nowhere do they give any real examples of MRAs promoting violence. The closest thing she has, I guess, is some fucking tweets that we don't even know who the fuck those people are. They're certainly not important within the MRM. But, I'll try to help because she's doing such a bad job building her case right now that I'm gonna help them out a little bit. So David Futrelle, when asked for evidence of the MRM supporting terrorism or supporting violence, there's a few examples that he likes to always go to because he thinks that they're smoking guns. And they're probably the closest thing to a smoking gun that you can possibly get. So I'm going to present them. I'm going to do you a favor because, like I said at the beginning of the video, I think we're going to be friends. I'm going to help you out. So first, let's talk about Thomas Ball. Thomas Ball was a man who self-immolated in front of the family court due to the way that he was treated by it. And in his suicide note, he very clearly, very explicitly called for people to burn down buildings, to commit arson, and he had details and everything. And David Futrelle points to AVFM publishing the suicide note as evidence that AVFM is pro-terrorism. But they also included this commentary. Thomas Ball represents a tragic, dysfunctional reaction to chronic systemic abuse. There are many possible reactions, some even worse than his. And while we cannot, must not condone violence, we had better learn to expect it as long as an ideological war against men is allowed to make a battlefield in our justice system and within the heart of our own families. He's absolutely correct. And people, what they try to do is say, oh, look, he said you can expect violence. That's a call for violence. No, it's not. Literally right before he says we cannot, must not condone violence. It's the same argument as saying that, I guess, a climatologist who says, well, if we're going to keep with these policies, we better expect was, I guess, not global warming, climate catastrophe. The climate will change. We better expect it, right? You don't point to that, to their doomsday theories and say, oh, well, I guess you fucking hate the world and you want it all to die. Clearly, he doesn't want this to happen. He's saying we can expect it to happen because this is how you're treating men. He's 100% correct. 100% correct. And, like, I despise people who are offended at the things Paul Elam's written. Paul Elam has written nothing offensive. I think he's written things that make sense and are honest, and I think everyone else is just too much of a fucking pussy to deal with it. So I'll fucking white knight for Paul Elam till the fucking cows come home. The fucking feminist cows. And here's another classic that Futrelle likes to cite as, I guess, promoting violence. I love this. I love this passage so much. I'm gonna read it just for fun. Shit. In the name of equality and fairness, I am proclaiming October to be Bash a Violent Bitch Month. I'd like to make it the objective for the remainder of this month and all the Octobers that follow for men who are being attacked and physically assaulted by women to beat the living shit out of them. I don't mean subdue them or deliver an open-handed pop on the face to get them to settle down. I mean literally to grab them by the hair and smack their face against the wall to the smugness of beating on someone because you know they won't fight back drains from their nose with a few million red corpuscles. And then make them clean up the mess. Now, am I serious about this? No. Not because it's wrong. It's not wrong. Everyone should have the right to defend themselves. But it isn't worth the time behind bars or the abuse of anger management training that men must endure if they are uppity enough to defend themselves from female attackers. But this one's my favorite. I have ideas about women who spend evenings in bars hustling men for drinks, playing on their sexual desires, and the women who drink and make out doing everything short of sex with men all evening and then go to his apartment at 2 a.m. Sometimes both of these women end up being the victims of rape. But are these women asking to get raped? In the most severe and empathetic terms possible, the answer is no. They are not asking to get raped. They are freaking begging for it. Damn near demanding it. And all of the outraged PC demands to get huffy and point out how nothing justifies or excuses rape won't change the fact that there are a lot of women who get pummeled and pumped because they are stupid and often arrogant enough to walk around life with the equivalent of a "I'm a stupid conniving bitch, please rape me" neon sign glowing above their empty little narcissistic heads. Fucking mic drop. I'm not gonna actually drop my mic because I don't want to break it, but it's a brilliant point because it takes the whole victimhood or victim blaming narrative and flips it on its head. Because you know what? People take the rape of women extremely seriously in society in a way that men, not only do men not have it, but men don't even dream of it being something that's afforded to them, and women just take it for granted. So many women just take it for granted. It never occurs to them that men are expected to endanger themselves by intervening. Men are expected to pay for the services. You know, like, it doesn't even occur to them. No. And then this whole attitude of like, it doesn't matter where I am, what I'm doing. I have absolutely no responsibility to protect myself whatsoever. We only apply it in the situation involving the crime that's taken more seriously than absolutely anything else. It's fucking stupid. It's completely fucking stupid, and somebody needs to say it like it is. This message needs to be delivered to women. Don't fucking beg to get raped. Like, I don't know why this is so offensive to people. It's like, it's fucking obvious. I think people are just fucking idiots and pussies. Like, yeah, you're offended. That's your fucking lizard brain. That's your fucking tradcon lizard brain saying protect the women. Stop being a fucking simp. And if you think tone is the problem, guess again, bitch. There's this thing called the pink pill. I coined that term. It's the sugar-coated red pill, and basically it means Cassie Jaye, it means Warren Farrell, it means Crystal Garcia, and shit, they get shat on too. Watch, check it out.
Blogger David Futrelle has launched a misogynistic smear campaign against me. David Futrelle's false allegations have been that this film is funded by MRAs The majority of our funding is from middle-of-the-road supporters of free speech and combating censorship. Self-identifying MRA backers, as well as feminist backers on our Kickstarter, have been in the minority. Another false allegation made by David Futrelle is that the award I won in Cannes, France, is a fake because it was not won at Festival de Cannes. Cannes is a city in France that has had many events that include the city's name in them. One such event was called the Cannes Independent Film Festival, which is not affiliated with Festival de Cannes, and for David Futrelle to call it a fake award is a disgusting attack on all independent filmmakers who put their blood, sweat, finances, and tears into making their project and then passionately try to obtain an audience for that film. So what does this all mean? There is a smear campaign against me, a female filmmaker, who is looking to make a balanced film allowing all views to be represented. While one side is concerned about being taken out of context like they so often have been, they have instead chose to take a gamble and support this film in the hopes that it is truly the balanced film that I am insisting it will be. While the other side, with some exceptions, has first passively declined showing any support for this film until the film started receiving support from those they oppose. That's when they have allowed for one feminist blogger to lead the charge of a full-on smear campaign against me based on nothing but lies and his own malice. I interviewed many feminists for The Red Pill who told me, go to David Futrelle's site. He's done all the research you need to know about the men's rights movement. He is the best source. I intended to interview David Futrelle and use his findings and research in my film, but how can I accept him as a credible source now? To all the people who are warning me about attacks I will receive from men's rights activists, please present a mirror to your own.
Amanda Marcotte and David Futrelle are not directly responsible. But these problems are not just Canadian problems or US problems or British problems. The Duluth model of domestic violence, the model written by feminist academics and activists and which at best describes maybe 20% of domestic violence situations, is the most widely used model in the world. Western governments take their cue from other Western governments. They did this with the Tender Years Doctrine, they did this with women's suffrage, they do this with all kinds of things. If the US is using this model, then it must be a good model. This is the model Biden subscribes to with his support for the VAWA, even though he's publicly admitted having been physically bullied and abused by his sisters while he was growing up. Amanda Marcotte, in her book It's a Jungle Out There, claimed the MRM is full of shit because, quote, according to MRAs, if a man bruises his knuckles on your face, then you've both sustained a domestic violence injury. The blog Linear Thinker published a year or two ago an article refuting David Futrelle's assertions about domestic violence and posted 69 scholarly citations that exposed all the guy's lies and misrepresentations. Yet David Futrelle still portrays MRAs as a bunch of violent thugs who want to make it legal to beat your wife.
Just after lunchtime in Toronto today, a van plowed into pedestrians.
Here's what we know right now. At least 10 people are dead.
The search is on for a motive.
Recently in Toronto, a guy drove a van through a crowd of people. He killed 10 and he injured another 16. His alleged motivation was largely his hatred for women.
According to the lead investigator on that case, there is no evidence that the driver was expressly aiming the vehicle at women.
He was a part of a movement called incels. He was really angry that women weren't sleeping with him.
INVOLUNTARLYSCEIV. That's an awfully fucked up way to spell MRA. 3 letters. I don't know how you did so bad.
So it's easy to sort of laugh off these MRAs. But something happens to them, and they develop into much bigger threats and much greater monsters. The world of online misogynists has ballooned in recent years, splintering into diverse factions who preach everything from swearing off relationships to advocating for date rape.
The world of online misogynists, I guess we're just all misogynists. There's absolutely no reason that people would be part of any of these groups other than that they hate women, I guess. You know how ridiculous how fucking narcissistic you have to be to think that people hate you that much. Like people hate women, and that's why they advocate for men's rights. But they also hate women, and that's why they advocate for basing their life around gaining consent from as many women as possible for sex. Also, people hate women, and that's why they say we need to avoid women and not have any communication with them for our own safety. That's based on hatred of women. Also, the alt-right is based on hatred of women. Like, see how fucking stupid this is? Like, how dumb are incels who are just miserable because they don't have love and affection and care and concern from women. It's because they hate women, right? It's completely ridiculous. You'll also notice she placed MRAs in the middle. I mean, none of these links have anything to them. She just has these dots and draws links. You could literally put anything here and then just draw circles. Like, people are just dumb enough to think that because she put it into a graphic it must be true. I mean, like, look at this. It's like ridiculous. It's going to get more ridiculous. Just give it a minute.
With hundreds of thousands of members around the world,
they only show this graphic for like a couple of really, really quick seconds. It's not long enough to actually look at it. So I blew it up here and like, oh my god, we could talk about this forever. It's super fucking funny how they have it all laid out. I mean, but shit, you invited everybody. We got Karen Straughan, got the Honey Badge, got Allison Tiemann, Hannah Wallen, and fucking everybody. Got Judgy Bitch. You know, even Turd Flinging Monkeys over there in MGTOW land. You know, represent. They got Stefan Molyneux on the alt-right. I mean, I guess, but no, not really. He's an anarchist like me. I guess that's why they didn't put like an exact line there. Maybe there's some logic to that, but like the placement of these groups is totally fucking arbitrary. Like, most of these groups on a very fundamental level have diametric opposition to each other. Like the alt-right, that's not even a pro-manosphere thing, really. Honestly, it's full of fucking tradcons. I guess putting the tradcons with the PUAs sort of makes sense, except 0%, like not fucking, not at all, like at all. And like MGTOW and the MRM really have a fundamental disagreement about, you know, what's practicable. It was kind of like an uneasy alliance there. Incels, I guess incels and PUAs ironically kind of have more in common in that I guess an incel is kind of like a failed PUA in that way. But like, if you were gonna keep on with this, you know, I would put everything feminist to the left of like pickup artistry and the alt-right, because, you know, that's just another form of traditionalism, basically. If you want to play this game of just like really, really loose and lazy associations, but like really they're not proud of this. I can tell they put a lot of work into it. They're not very proud of it. They don't feel very strongly that these connections make any fucking sense. Also, the most important thing is like they have these distinct groups here, yet for this entire fucking thing, she's been pointing to people who are either MGTOW, pickup artists, or incels to try to argue that MRAs are terrorists somehow. Like, so what this shows you is that apparently they actually are capable of making distinctions between these groups, but they just choose not to, because this bitch is a journalist, I guess.
This ever-growing network has been dubbed the manosphere. But what would a movement for men that isn't mired in hate look like?
I guess we'll never know. It's not like you could just like go to YouTube and like watch one of Karen's videos or something.
It's the ideology that's responsible for the situation that led Earl Silverman to believe killing himself was the best or only way to expose the problem. And every single public figure who's willing to knowingly and repeatedly lie about intimate partner violence is partly culpable. The feminists who terrorized Erin Pitsey into fleeing the UK for her own safety because she dared to say that more than half the women seeking help in her battered women's refuge were as violent as their men, and that they were also violent toward their children. The feminists at the Now conference who listened in icy silence to a lesbian activist who complained that the gendered language of domestic violence law and policy doesn't serve the victims in her community, and who refused to applaud until she had made the addendum that, of course I'm not saying that partner violence isn't gendered, of course it's gendered. The feminist academics who stood up en masse and walked out on Murray Strauss's address when he was elected president of the Society for the Study of Social Problems, even though his speech that day was primarily about the harms of spanking your children, simply because he publishes research on partner violence that asks men and women the same questions. The feminist grad student and her feminist professor who took data from Statistics Canada showing 601,000 female victims and 585,000 male victims and transformed that data in their report to 1.2 million Canadian women. They're all culpable. And the really horrible thing is that the current feminist approach to this problem is not going to stop the cycle of family and partner violence. It really doesn't matter if a kid grows up seeing dad beat the shit out of mom or mom beat the shit out of dad. That kid is just as likely to grow up believing that the way to resolve conflicts with your spouse is to start swinging. More than that, what lesson is a boy learning when he sees his father call 911 for help, only to be the one arrested and removed, regardless of who was the violent partner and even who was more severely injured? What lesson is a girl learning when she sees that?
The first thing I have to do to report this is I've got to talk to one of them.
Or maybe in a parallel universe where you actually do your fucking job, you talk to more than one of them.
Which I can't say that I'm looking forward to.
Everywhere you look, there are feminists pushing their way to the front of the line, demanding women's fair share of all of the goodies. It's just crazy.
Karen Straughan is an MRA, and she also happens to be a woman. After I appeared in a segment on Canadian television discussing MRAs, you can go online and you can have 1,000 men send you a note as a woman that they would like to kill you. She and another female MRA, they call themselves honey badgers, took to YouTube.
Can we stop for a second?
It's not okay to feel marginalized as a man.
Yeah, because it's against the identity of being man.
No, because this cunt, sitting here with this smug look on her face, this cunt will laugh at you.
It would have been nice if you had included the part of the clip that they were actually responding to. Like, clearly it was something earlier on in the segment, but no, the only thing you care about is just, oh my god, I got called a cunt. Hey, remember when you mentioned the male suicide rate?
High suicide rates for men and allegedly false rape allegations.
Are you gonna talk about that issue? Are we gonna come back to that, or is it gonna be wham Karen called me a cunt all day?
I'd love to know how, as a woman, she legitimizes this movement in her own head.
That's right. Karen needs to take her short hair and her comfy shoes back to the plantation. Get back on the plantation!
I'm surprised that you accepted the interview request.
It was unexpected that you invited me to.
What brought you into this fight? Seems like an odd place for a woman.
Get back on the plantation!
Well, I stumbled across the men's movement kind of by accident. I was just divorced and met a man, and we were dating, and he was telling me, his horror story with an ex-partner.
How do you view the position of men in society today?
Oh, I think that they kind of have a constant bombardment of negativity aimed at them.
I want to talk to you a little bit about what's been going on in Toronto, and I want to know how you felt about the van attack. You consider it a misogynistic attack.
I think that that's probably pretty much what's going on there.
So how do you feel about that?
Well, I just wish he'd found my videos or Honey Badger Brigade videos, because what we would have told him is you need to stop basing your self-worth on the approval of women. Go out, get a hobby, make some male friends, take up a sport.
I mean, so you don't feel that the videos at all are responsible for inciting a larger movement of hatred within MRAs?
I don't think so.
In one of the videos, you suggested that when they say that they hope I get raped, that's not a threat.
It's not.
I disagree with you.
I hope you get hit by a bus is not a threat to steal a bus and run you down. It's certainly not nice, but
Well, how do you reconcile with that kind of language that's being used online within
That's
your
anger.
movement?
How do you reconcile with the second wave feminists or even ones that are writing articles today? Julie Bindel said men should be put in concentration camps.
I disavow them and I disagree with them.
Oh, shut up. You don't even know who Julie Bindel is.
Okay, but it's anger.
But I'm giving you an opportunity to do that and you're not doing it.
No, I'm not.
I think within feminism, they want it to be easier for men to ask for help, to get a therapist, to ask for affection, or to ask for care in a way that they maybe don't feel like they can right now.
Let's just say, for the purpose of argument, that 10% of the victims of serious domestic violence are male. Women have a virtual 100% monopoly on services, and you have government funding, millions and millions of dollars a year of government funding going to domestic violence services for women, right?
Which is required. I mean, they need it.
Some men need it too.
Okay, I'm not saying that we need to choke them out from having any of it. I'm just saying.
But that's what the services and shelters do.
How are you?
Earlier today, I talked to Karen Straughan.
Oh God, how did that go?
I mean, it wasn't fun. She doesn't think that she triggers hatred or violence or that she's sort of a part of the radicalization of young men. She's really washing her hands of almost any influence.
God, I know Karen won't take credit for that van attack she had nothing to do with. What a bitch.
She's not the person to talk to have a nuance.
No, and I don't think and I don't think she has the capacity to actually develop solutions.
Well, I just wish she'd found my videos or Honey Badger Brigade videos, because what we would have told him is you need to stop basing your self-worth on the approval of women. Go out, get a hobby, make some male friends, take up a sport.
Yeah, and I don't think she has the capacity to actually develop solutions.
Now, I'm not one of those people who thinks there should automatically be an equal number of beds and equal public spending on services for male victims. Even if there are an equal number of male victims, men and women are going to, generally speaking, respond differently to partner violence and require different supports and assistance. It's entirely possible that because of general personality differences between men and women, men will not utilize domestic violence services to the same degree or in the same way women do. That's all fine. But in Alberta, there are at least 619 publicly funded beds for women, and there are in the province, in total, 2 beds. I'm not sure whether they're even publicly funded for men. Both of them are in Strathmore, which is so small a community I couldn't even begin to tell you where the fuck it is on the map.
So let's find someone who could be more thoughtful about this.
Yeah. Paige Flink runs The Family Place, a nonprofit for domestic violence victims that recently opened one of only 2 shelters in the U.S., specifically for men. How many people are staying here right now?
So right now we have 11 people. We have up to 22 beds. 7 bedrooms, but it really depends on the configuration of the family.
And so they can bring their kids here as well?
Yes. A man can come with his child because of family violence.
Oh.
Elsewhere in Alberta and in the rest of Canada, men with children leaving an abusive spouse face the wonderful option of leaving their children in the sole care of a violent woman or risking a child abduction charge. Official acknowledgement of and services for male victims might mitigate that risk and remove both men and children from terrible situations, but as it stands now, the male perpetrator, female victim paradigm informs all the responses of police, the court, and government agencies. In fact, the system currently provides abusive women an additional weapon, the system itself, to bludgeon their male partners with, if they so desire. False and frivolous allegations of abuse enabled by a system based entirely on feminist ideology allow women to batter their partners by proxy using the police, the courts, and the family law. Every single person who supports this bullshit is a little bit culpable. Not for Earl's death, because that was, in my opinion, his own decision. A final strategy that might work where even getting himself charged with extortion hadn't. But for a system that justifies its own continued existence by perpetuating rather than alleviating the cycle of family violence.
This has been an unknown and really underserved population, the male victim of domestic violence.
How busy has it been since you opened?
Well, last year we served over 50 people, and this year we're on track to probably double that.
We've known that there's gender parity in domestic violence for decades, and because of the feminist movement and because of the Duluth model, this has been ignored. And virtually all domestic violence shelters are built on this model, and it's done for a cynical reason. They want to maintain the cycle of family violence, because if they solve the problem, then this bitch is out of a job. Why do you think the number would increase at such a dramatic rate after shortly opening? Because the demand has always been there, and this is what they're seeing with basically no outreach. You know, they have men's services as a fucking CYA. It's to cover her ass.
Oh, wow, that's a lot. I was going to ask, I mean, it seems like there's a different set of expectations for men and for women about who can ask for help.
Oh, well, our culture thinks men, man up, be tough, don't cry, stiff upper lip, all those kinds of things.
First, it started with property damage. She bust my apartment windows and then hit me in the face with a brick. She hit me in my face, my arm, and my rib.
Did you call the police at any point during these violent outbursts?
I called the police on the second incident, but it's like I was the suspect, you know.
The Violence Against Women Act may have had something to do with that.
Did you feel any anxiety about asking for help?
It's one thing that was my fear. It's like they're gonna just look at me as weak. But everybody I have dealt with that's heard my situation, most cases they kind of commend me for just coming forward and actually, you know, doing something about it without reacting and doing something to her. That's more the weaker aspect, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Men's rights activists?
No support from them at all.
Nothing?
Nothing at all.
Like not even like a kind
Not even like,
or...
No.
The MRAs speak frequently about the idea that feminism gives so much focus on women as the victims of domestic violence that it takes attention away from men.
Well, we're here at the Family Place to prove them wrong.
About 2 decades ago, Earl left an abusive marriage and he sought help within his community. What he found were services dedicated to female victims and treatment programs for male batterers. It wasn't just assumed that he was the perpetrator of abuse in his marriage. It was considered an impossibility that he could be a victim of female perpetrated abuse. He even said that one advocate he was talking to said she would take the word of one woman over 100 studies showing female perpetration and male victims. He started a men's crisis line and a support group, the Family of Men's Support Society, which he operated for 20 years. He watched very, very closely as researchers and advocates from Murray Strauss to Suzanne Steinmetz to Martin Fieber to Donald Dutton to Aaron Pitsey to Eugene Lupri and countless others published survey after survey demonstrating that current official models of domestic violence and current government and community strategies for intervention and treatment were based on a fundamental misunderstanding of the problem. He watched as a growing mountain of social science research was not only ignored by government agencies and ministries, but actively suppressed. Curious as to how data from Statistics Canada showing roughly equal numbers of male and female perpetrators and victims wasn't finding its way onto publicly funded websites and information sources on domestic violence, he went and did his own investigation into how things work. What he found amazingly was that in Canada, any report on any gendered issue moving from one ministry to another, say from the Ministry of Health to the Ministry of Justice, must first be vetted and approved by the Minister for the Status of Women. If that minister feels that said report would be detrimental to the treatment or status of women in society, the report stops at the minister's desk. In 2010, Earl finally took it upon himself to purchase a house and run it as a shelter for men leaving violent relationships. He operated it out of his own pocket and private donations, and by having to charge clients $20 per night to cover costs. In 2012, in court again, attempting to be granted a hearing in front of the Human Rights Council, he made a tactical decision he hoped would result in all of this stuff getting on the public record. He made a frivolous threat against one of the two opposing attorneys in a court document he then presented to the judge. A threat that was comparable to, "I'll blast him with my phaser." His house was raided, all his computers and documents seized, and he was arrested and charged with extortion. Now, that was what he was hoping would happen. It was his hope that a criminal proceeding would provide a venue for his experiences to become a matter of public record, that all the evidence not made available to the public because the HRC wouldn't even permit him a hearing in which to present it would come out in his criminal trial. Now, I remember telling him over the phone that the moment this particular attorney realized that that's what would happen in a criminal trial, that the charges would be quietly dropped. And surprise, surprise, they were. Now, just this year, I think it was at the start of this year, maybe the very end of last year, Earl was invited onto a local current events program called Alberta Primetime, to discuss male victims of domestic violence and the lack of services for them. Former Edmonton Mayor and current provincial coordinator for the Alberta Council of Women's Shelters, Jan Reimer, was invited onto the program as well. She declined to appear. Production staff reported that she said, so much as showing up to discuss male victims would only lend legitimacy to the fact that they exist. Just a few months ago, Earl finally found himself too deep in debt to continue to operate his shelter. So he closed it down and sold the house. The day after moving his belongings out, he hanged himself in the garage, and he left a 4-page suicide note. I think he did it for the same reason he made that threat, wrote it on a piece of paper, and then handed it to a judge. Because he was determined to get all of this on the public record, in official documentation, even if it had to be through a suicide note published in a medical examiner's report. Shortly after Earl's suicide, feminist Mary Elizabeth Williams published an article at Salon.com disavowing any feminist culpability for his death. What I found most illuminating about her article was that she defended feminism from culpability by repeating the exact same biased and faulty statistics and the exact same lies about domestic violence that feminist lobbying has managed to institutionalize in legislation and in government and police policy. The exact same bullshit Earl ended his life to expose.
Can someone grab that staff back there? Anybody else have intensity they're bringing with them today?
Yeah.
So come on to the middle, put your hand on the staff, and let's put all the intensity into the staff.
The Mankind Project is a 35-year-old brotherhood of nonprofit organizations around the world whose aim is to support men.
So this is here being depicted as essentially the solution to all men's issues. Like, could you imagine like a female, like, we're gonna gender flip this, okay? So imagine you're a woman and it doesn't matter what female specific gender issue you're having, we have one solution, one size fits all for all of them, and you're gonna braid each other's hair and write poems about your mom and scream and have trust falls and pass around a rain stick. And if that doesn't speak to you, if that's not what you want to do, well then fuck you, you're probably fucking toxic. That's essentially what the narrative here is. Now look, Mankind Project is great, I'm glad that they can help people and we need more of it. But it's not for everyone. I don't think that this is the solution for every single man. And certainly what we need are solutions that are tailored to the actual issues. Oh, hey, by the way, are we going to go back to male suicide? Are we going to mention that issue or like actually explore it a little bit?
Men are hurting in a huge way, and the ones who are inflicting a lot of the pain and suffering and oppression that is happening across all strata of society. And what we're doing is we're empowering men to be the best versions of themselves for society, for the women in their lives, for the children in their lives, and most importantly for themselves.
This is my one major beef with the Mankind Project, because it does seem to be a thread that they don't see men as an end in themselves. It's always we need to help men because men are fucking toxic monsters who are hurting society, or we need to help men so they can be better to their wives and to their children. I get it, he's phrased it in a way where he says most importantly for themselves, but you're gonna see what I'm seeing in a moment here.
Let's heal masculinity so that we don't have so many hurt men out there laying waste to communities.
Completely wrong. We need to help men because men are human beings, not human doings.
This is a version of a solution that would benefit everybody, I think. They're trying to do some work that hopefully will change things generationally.
I'm really glad that you're satisfied with this as a solution. That means a lot to me.
How do we talk to boys when they're really little? And how do we condition them? And what do we let them get away with?
Little boys need to be kept as far away from this woman as possible.
And then what do we...
Game, son! It's the fucking man's game, son!
I don't know how to fix that.
I completely agree, and absolutely no one is counting on you.
A lot of the things that MRAs talk about are legitimate problems. When they talk about the male suicide rate or domestic violence, those things are real. But there's a huge difference between supporting other men by advocating for those issues and blaming it all on women.
I think you're confusing that with adult responsibility. Right now, women have the rights of adults and the responsibilities of children. Anti-feminism is the radical notion that women are adults. So I ask you, are women adults or are they children?
It's selfish, it's simplistic, and it can have serious consequences in the real world. MRAs say we won't let them be vulnerable, but then they hide that vulnerability behind the walls of these aggressive and sometimes violent groups. Men are hurting, and they deserve our help, but not at the expense of everyone else.
Okay, women don't either then. We can get rid of the government now.